At the family reunion, my mom snatched the chair from under my son and said, "That seat's not yours." He stumbled and no one helped him except me. Then I got angry and announced this. My mom started begging desperately, but My mother pulled a chair out from under my 4-year-old son at Thanksgiving dinner. Just yanked it. Right there, in front of 23 members of our family, my little boy hit the floor and not a single person moved. Not one. Except me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because if I'm going to tell you this story, and trust me, you need to hear all of it, you have to understand the kind of family I come from. The kind where love comes with conditions and the conditions change depending on who you are. My name is Brooke. I'm 31, I live outside of Richmond, Virginia, and up until about 4 months ago, I genuinely believed that if I just tried hard enough, if I was just kind enough, patient enough, generous enough, my mother would eventually treat my son Oliver the way she treats my brother's kids. I know. I can already hear some of you saying, "Girl, how long did it take you to figure that out?" And honestly, way too long. Way too long. So here's the thing about my family. My dad, Gene, is a quiet man. He's a retired electrician, 64 years old, reads the paper every morning, drinks his coffee black, and mostly stays out of whatever drama my mother, Patrice, decides to cook up. He's not weak, I want to be clear about that. My dad is one of the strongest men I know. But he spent 37 years married to a woman who fills every room she walks into with her opinions, and somewhere along the way he just stopped fighting her on things. He picks his battles. And for most of my life I wasn't one of the battles he picked. My brother Craig is 3 years older than me. 34. He's got 2 kids, Hayden, who's 6, and Madeline, who's 8. Craig married a woman named Jess, and the moment Jess came into the picture, my mother acted like the royal family had just expanded. Jess could do no wrong. Jess brought the perfect casserole. Jess dressed the kids in the cutest outfits. Jess. And then there's my sister Deanna. 28. She lives about 10 minutes from my parents, and she is, how do I put this politely, my mother's parrot. Whatever Patrice says, Deanna repeats. Whatever Patrice feels, Deanna feels louder. I love my sister, I do, but the girl has never had an original opinion in her life. If my mother said the sky was green tomorrow, Deanna would argue with a meteorologist about it. Now me. I was always the one who did everything right and still somehow got it wrong. I graduated with honors. I started my own small business doing interior staging for real estate listings, and honestly it took off. By the time I was 29, I had saved just over $50,000. Not inherited. Not gifted. Earned. Every single dollar. But to my mother, that didn't matter. Because Craig had a wife and 2 kids and a normal 9 to 5, and that to Patrice was success. Me. I was a single mom with a little hobby. That's what she called my business. A little hobby. Even after I staged a $3 million listing in Henrico County. A little hobby. Oliver's dad isn't in the picture. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because honestly he doesn't deserve the airtime. His name was Todd. He left when Oliver was 10 months old, and the last I heard he was somewhere in Florida doing absolutely nothing useful. So it's been me and Oliver against the world since he was basically a baby. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. That kid is my whole universe. But my mom? She treated Oliver like he was optional. Like he was a background character in the family story. Craig's kids would come over and she'd bake cookies, set up craft tables, buy matching pajamas for Christmas photos. Oliver would come over and she'd say things like, "Oh, I didn't know you were bringing him," as if I was going to leave my 3-year-old home alone with a bag of chips and a prayer. Do you think I didn't notice? Of course I noticed. Every single time. But I kept telling myself it would get better. I kept telling myself maybe she just needed more time. Maybe if I brought Oliver around more, she'd warm up. Maybe if I didn't make waves, the water would calm down on its own. I was so wrong. So let me tell you about the Thanksgiving that changed everything. My parents host every year. It's at their house in Midlothian, this big colonial they've had since I was 12. The whole family comes, aunts, uncles, cousins, the works. My mom spends 2 weeks preparing, and I'm not exaggerating. She plans the seating chart like it's a state dinner. She irons the tablecloths. She puts name cards at every single place setting. And every year I help. I bring dishes, I help decorate, I show up early to set things up. This year I got there at 9 in the morning. Oliver was with me, wearing this little button-down shirt with tiny dinosaurs on it. I swear he looked like the most handsome man in Virginia. I walked in and my mother barely looked at us. She was too busy arranging the centerpiece and telling Deanna where to put the candles. "Mom, where should I put the sweet potato casserole?" I asked. "On the counter. Not the island. The counter." "No hello. No. Oh, Oliver, look at you. Nothing." Meanwhile, Craig showed up around noon with Jess and the kids, and you would have thought the president walked through that door. My mother literally clapped. She clapped her hands and ran over and scooped up Hayden and Madeline and started going on about how much they'd grown, How beautiful they looked, how she had a special surprise for them later. Oliver tugged on my jeans and whispered, "Mama, does Grandma not like me? I want you to sit with that for a second." A 4-year-old. Asking his mother why his grandmother doesn't like him. Tell me that doesn't break your heart because it absolutely shattered mine. I knelt down and told him, "Baby, Grandma loves you so much. She's just busy right now." And I hated myself for saying it because I didn't even believe it. Dinner was at 4 o'clock. 23 people around a massive table my dad had built an extension for. There were name cards at every seat just like always. I found mine. I found Oliver's, down at the very end of the table, squeezed between 2 empty chairs, practically in the hallway. Meanwhile, Hayden and Madeline were sitting right next to my mother. Right next to her. With their little name cards written in gold ink while Oliver's was scribbled in blue ballpoint like an afterthought. I moved Oliver's card. I put him next to me in a chair closer to the middle of the table. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly moved it. And then, everyone's sitting down. The food is out, the prayer's been said, and Oliver climbs up into the chair I moved him to. He's smiling. He's got his little legs swinging because they don't touch the floor. And my mother walks over, looks at the chair, looks at Oliver and says, in front of everyone, "That seat's not yours, sweetheart." And she pulled the chair back. Oliver slipped. He didn't fall hard, but he stumbled off the edge of the seat and hit his hip on the chair leg. His eyes went wide and for a second it was dead silent. He looked around the table, at his Uncle Craig, at his Aunt Jess, at Deanna, at my cousins, and nobody moved. Nobody said a word. My mother just slid the chair back toward the end of the table and said, "There's a spot for him down there." Something in me cracked. Something in me broke open. I got up, picked up Oliver, held him against my chest, and I could feel his little heart pounding. He wasn't crying yet, he was too confused to cry. And I looked at my mother, and for the first time in 31 years, I didn't swallow what I wanted to say. "What is wrong with you?" The whole table went quiet. Like eerily quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the gravy cooling. My mother blinked. "Excuse me. You heard me, Patrice. What is wrong with you? He's 4. He's your grandson. And you just pulled a chair out from under him like he's some stranger who wandered in off the street." She started doing that thing she does. The little laugh, the wave of the hand, that, "Oh, Brooke, you're being dramatic" routine. But I wasn't having it. Not this time. "No," I said. "I'm not being dramatic. I've watched you treat my son like he doesn't exist for 4 years. I've watched you buy matching Christmas pajamas for Craig's kids and forget Oliver entirely. I've watched you plan birthday parties for Hayden and Madeline and not even call Oliver on his." And I said nothing. Every single time I said nothing. Because I genuinely thought, that if I was patient enough you'd come around. I could feel my hands shaking. Oliver had his face buried in my neck. And I said the thing I'd been thinking about for months. I was going to invest $50,000 into helping you and Dad renovate this house and turn the back lot into rental units. That was going to be my contribution to this family. My way of helping build something together. My mother's eyes went wide. She didn't know about the money. Nobody did except my dad. I talked to Gene about it a few weeks earlier, just him and me, and he'd been excited. He said it could help them with retirement. It was supposed to be a surprise. "But I'm not doing it," I said. "Not a dollar. Not a cent. I'm not investing in a family that treats my son like he's invisible." And then I grabbed Oliver's coat and I walked out. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. Got in my car, buckled my baby in and drove. Oliver was quiet the whole ride home. And then about 10 minutes in he said, "Mama, why did Grandma move my chair?" I pulled over. I pulled the car over on the side of the road and I just sat there holding the steering wheel, trying not to fall apart in front of my kid. Because he deserved better than that. He deserved so much better than that. I told him, "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, baby. But you will always, always have a chair next to me." He nodded. And then he said, "Can we get chicken nuggets?" I laughed. I laughed so hard I almost cried. 4 years old and he's already got his priorities straight. We got the nuggets. We went home. I put him to bed. And then I sat on my kitchen floor with a cup of coffee that I didn't even drink and I stared at my phone. 47 messages. 47. In the family group chat. And let me tell you, not a single one of them said, "Brooke, are you okay?" Or, "Is Oliver all right?" No. It was all about how I'd ruined Thanksgiving. How I'd embarrassed Mom. How I was selfish and ungrateful. Deanna sent a voice memo, saying I needed to apologize before Christmas or I wouldn't be welcome. And then at 11:47 p.m. my dad called. I almost didn't answer. But it was Gene. And Gene doesn't call unless it matters. "Brookie," he said. That's what he calls me. Always has. "Yeah, Dad. You did the right thing." 4 words. And I completely broke down. Because here's what I didn't know yet. What my dad had seen, what he'd been holding in, and what he was about to do about it. And trust me when I tell you what happened next, you're going to understand why I said my dad is one of the strongest men I know. But that, I'll get to very soon. So after my dad said those 4 words, "You did the right thing," I just lost it. Not the graceful kind of crying. The ugly, gasping, can't breathe kind. And my dad just stayed on the phone. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't give a speech. He just waited. "That's Jean." When I calmed down I said, "Dad, you saw her pull that chair. Why didn't you say anything?" Long pause. Then he said, "I know. And I'm ashamed of that. But I'm not going to be quiet anymore." I didn't fully understand what he meant yet. I figured he'd have a little talk with Patrice, smooth things over the way he always does. But what Jean actually did over the next few weeks, I never saw it coming. First though, let me tell you what my mother and Deanna were up to. Because those two were on a mission. Morning after Thanksgiving I woke up to a text from Deanna. Not a call. A text. Basically saying Mom was devastated, I humiliated her, Oliver was fine and I needed to apologize. My son got pulled off a chair by his own grandmother and somehow I was the villain. Does that make sense to anyone? Because it sure doesn't to me. I didn't respond. And that drove Deanna absolutely crazy. She lives for the back and forth. She wants the 12-round text argument so she can screenshot it and analyze every word with Mom over coffee. But I gave her nothing. Complete silence. And honestly that was more powerful than anything I could have typed. Over the next week my mom called everyone in the family except me. Craig, Deanna, my Aunt Lorraine, cousins, everyone. And the message was always the same. Brooke overreacted. Brooke ruined Thanksgiving. Brooke is ungrateful. My Aunt Lorraine, Dad's sister 71, lives in Charlottesville, has never liked Patrice. She called me and said, "Baby girl, I watched your mama pull that chair and I almost threw my dinner roll at her head." I spit out my coffee. Lorraine is 5'2" with arthritis in both hands, but I believe she would have launched that roll like a fastball. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Your mama doesn't dislike Oliver. She dislikes that you did it on your own. You didn't need her permission to build a life and she can't stand that. So she punishes the one person you love most because she knows that's where it hurts." That hit different. Because the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Patrice had always controlled who got praised and who got overlooked. And when I went out and built a career and raised my son without her approval, she couldn't handle it. So she took it out on a 4-year-old. Because he was the easiest target. That realization made me angrier than the chair incident itself. About a week and a half after Thanksgiving, Deanna shows up at my house. Unannounced. Oliver was napping, thank God, because what happened next was not a conversation I wanted him hearing. She walked in. I didn't invite her, she just walked in, and said, "We need to talk about this money situation." So Patrice had been talking. Of course she had. Because the second I mentioned that 50,000 at the table, it stopped being about Oliver and became about dollars. That's what got my mother's attention. Not her grandson. The money. Deanna sat on my couch and said, "Mom and Dad need that renovation. Dad's knees are bad, they need the first 4-bedroom conversion, and the rental income would help them retire. You can't pull that away because you're upset about a chair." A chair. She reduced the whole thing to furniture. "Deanna," I said, "did you come here to ask how Oliver's doing, or did you come here to guilt me into writing a check?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Oliver is fine," she said. "Kids fall off chairs all the time. He didn't fall. He pulled it. There's a difference." She left. Slammed my door so hard the wreath fell off. 20 minutes later I got a text from my mother. The first direct message since Thanksgiving. "I'm very disappointed in how you're treating your sister." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "How's Oliver?" Just disappointment. In me. For setting a boundary. Now here's the part where everything shifts and I need you to pay attention. 2 days later my dad drove to my house. Called ahead because Jean has manners. He showed up with animal crackers for Oliver and a toolbox because he'd noticed my porch railing was loose. That's my dad. Shows love by fixing things. While Oliver ate crackers on the porch, Jean told me what had been happening at home. After everyone left on Thanksgiving night he confronted my mother. Not a nudge. Not a suggestion. A real confrontation. He told her, "What you did to that boy was cruel. What you've been doing to Brooke for years is cruel." And I let it happen because I told myself it wasn't my place. But that's over. Patrice went through her whole playbook. Denial, tears, guilt tripping. Told him he was being manipulated. Told him I was holding money over their heads. And my dad said, "That girl earned every penny on her own. She doesn't owe us a dime. And if you think your grandson deserves less love because Brooke didn't do things the way you wanted, you need to take a hard look at yourself." Jean. 64. Quiet, coffee drinking, newspaper reading Jean. He said what nobody in our family had ever said to Patrice. She didn't take it well. Slept in the guest room 3 nights. Called Craig. Called Deanna for support. Built a whole little alliance against my dad. And Jean just didn't care. Went about his day. Fixed the faucet. Raked leaves. Watched football. Then something happened I truly didn't see coming. My cousin Farah, Uncle Mitch's daughter, lives in Norfolk, called me out of nowhere. She said, "Brooke, I need to tell you something." Apparently, my mother and Deanna had been calling around to family members telling a completely different version of the story. In their version, Oliver was running around wild, climbed into the wrong seat, slipped on his own, and I screamed at my mother and stormed out. They rewrote the whole thing like a bad movie script. But Farah was at that dinner. He saw everything. And she told me she'd already corrected 3 people. God bless Farah. I owe that woman a very expensive bottle of wine. So here I was, my mother rewriting history, my sister running her PR campaign, half my family confused, and my dad quietly waging a revolution inside his own house. And me sitting in my living room watching Oliver stack blocks, trying to figure out what to do next. Not about the money. That decision was made. Not a cent. But the bigger question was whether I was going to keep trying with this family at all, or whether it was time to build a life where my son never has to wonder why his grandmother doesn't love him. What I decided surprised even me. Because I didn't go the direction anyone expected. Not Mom, not Deanna, not even Dad. And what happened next completely reshaped everything. I'll get to that very soon. So here's what I decided. I decided to stop fighting. Not the way my mother wanted. I wasn't crawling back to apologize. I decided to stop fighting for a place in a family that didn't make room for my son. Done. Finished. I called my dad and said, "I love you. I always will. But I'm stepping back from Mom, from Deanna, from the holidays in the group chat. I need to focus on Oliver." And Jean said, "I understand, Brookie. But I'm not losing my grandson. So I'll come to you. That man. Do you see why I said he's one of the strongest people I know?" So December came, and for the first time in my life, I didn't go to my parents' house for Christmas. Oliver and I had our own. We made pancakes shaped like candy canes. They looked more like the letter J having a bad day, and we opened presents in our pajamas. Jean drove over in the afternoon with a toy truck way too big for my living room, but Oliver loved it so much he slept next to it that night. Most peaceful holiday I'd ever had. And that should tell you something, because peace shouldn't feel unfamiliar. But for me it did. Now on the other side, my mother was furious. Not reflective. Furious. She told everyone I was punishing her, manipulating Jean, being selfish. And Deanna ate it up and asked for seconds. But here's the thing about alliances built on lies. The truth eventually shows up uninvited. Farah had been quietly correcting family members who were at that Thanksgiving table. Even my cousin Derek, who'd called me intense, came around and apologized in mid-December. Aunt Lorraine called Patrice directly and said, "Fix this or you'll lose that girl forever. And you'll deserve it." Patrice hung up on her. Naturally. January rolled around and Deanna called me. "Mom's having a small dinner. Just family. She wants to make things right." Something in my gut said don't trust it. But part of me wanted to believe. So I called my dad. "Did you know about this dinner?" He paused. "Patrice mentioned something. She didn't tell me details." Red flag. If Jean didn't know details, Patrice was hiding something. So Jean went home, sat across from her and said, "What's this dinner about? Don't sugarcoat it." And it all came out. It wasn't a reconciliation dinner. It was an ambush. My mother and Deanna had planned an intervention where the family would sit me down and explain why I was wrong. Why the money should go to the renovation. Why I needed to apologize. They'd even recruited Craig and Jess. An intervention. Because I protected my child. The audacity was so enormous it looped right back around to absurd. And this is where Jean changed everything. He shut it all down. Told Patrice, "This dinner is not happening. If you do it behind my back, I will drive Brooke and Oliver home myself, and you and I will have a very different conversation when I get back." He called Craig and said, "Your mother's planning something that will blow this family apart permanently. Stay out of it." He called Deanna and said, "I love you, but you need to stop being your mother's messenger. You're 28. Think for yourself." For phone calls in one evening. After 37 years of staying quiet, Jean picked up the phone and chose his family over the chaos. Craig backed off immediately. Deanna was rattled. And Patrice went quiet. For the first time in my memory, my mother had nothing to say. 2 weeks of silence. No emails. No texts through Deanna. Nothing. Then on a random Tuesday in February my doorbell rang. I opened the door and my mother was standing there. No Deanna. No backup. Just Patrice in her coat holding a small gift bag. She looked tired. And for the first time in maybe my entire adult life, she didn't look like she was performing. She looked like a woman who'd run out of scripts. Can I come in? I almost said no. But I looked at her face and saw something I'd never seen. She was scared. Not of me. Of losing me. I let her in. Oliver was on the floor with his blocks. He looked up at her and didn't say anything. Just looked. I could see that register on her face. Her own grandson wasn't excited to see her. That's a consequence you can't argue your way out of. She held out the gift bag. Inside was a pair of dinosaur pajamas. The same brand she always buys for Hayden and Madeline. I noticed, she said quietly, that I never bought him any. Then she said, Jean told me I was going to lose you. Lorraine said I'd deserve it. I was so angry at both of them. But then you didn't come for Christmas and I kept looking at your empty chair and I thought. She stopped. Took a breath. I thought about how Oliver must have felt when I moved his. That sentence broke something loose in me. Because it meant she finally saw it. Not the money. Not the embarrassment. She saw a 4-year-old boy looking for a place to sit and being told he didn't belong. She said, I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time. I don't know how to fix it but I want to try. Oliver looked up and said, Are those for me? Pointing at the pajamas. She nodded. Do they have T-Rexes? Triceratops. He thought about it. That's okay. Triceratops are cool too. My mother laughed. Real laugh. And I saw her eyes get wet and she wiped them fast because God forbid Patrice cry in front of anyone. But I want to be honest with you. I didn't forgive everything on the spot. Trust doesn't come back because someone buys pajamas and says the right words. I told her, this is a start. But if you slip back into treating him like he's less than, I'm gone for good. No more chances. She nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't wave her hand. Just nodded. Then I said, I'm not investing the money, Mom. That's final. I'm putting it into Oliver's college fund and taking him to see the ocean this summer. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, he deserves that. That was enough. Not everything, but enough to start. Deanna came around a few weeks later. Hovered in my kitchen making small talk until finally she said, I should have asked about Oliver. That night and every day after. I didn't. I'm sorry. Coming from Deanna, who has spent her life echoing Patrice, saying something that was just hers actually meant a lot. So where are we now? Things aren't perfect. Patrice is still Patrice. She's not becoming a different person overnight. But she calls Oliver now. She sent him a birthday card with $20 and a note that said, for my favorite dinosaur expert. Small. But small is where it starts. Jean comes over every Saturday. Fixes things that don't need fixing just to have an excuse to sit on the porch with Oliver. Last week he taught him to use a tape measure. Oliver measured everything in the house. Apparently my refrigerator is 11 inches tall. Craig sent me a text that said, I should have caught Oliver that night. I'm sorry I didn't. Late? Yes. But I'll take it. Me. I booked the trip. Oliver and I are going to the Outer Banks this summer. Just us. I'm going to watch my son see the ocean for the first time, and I'm going to sit in a chair that nobody can pull out from under me. The $50,000? Every dollar is going toward Oliver's future. His education. His adventures. Because that money was never about a renovation. It was about building something. And the most important thing I'll ever build is a life where my son knows he has a place at the table. Always. That's my story. Messy, imperfect, and still very much in progress. But we're getting there. If you made it this far, thank you. If this hit close to home, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, a like would mean the world. And if you think I handled something wrong, tell me that too. I'm not here to be perfect, just honest. Thank you for watching and take care of the little people in your lives. They remember everything.